a record of progress photographed in August 1954 during a visit to Canberra by Sir Howard Florey, Professor of Experimental Pathology at Oxford University. It was on his recommendation that in 1946 the Australian government approved of the establishment of the school as an element of the new Australian National University to be founded in Canberra. During his visit, Sir Howard discusses with the Vice-Chancellor of the University, Mr. Melville, the location of the school in relation to other university buildings on the model of the site. Sir Howard also discusses the detailed plans of the school with the Dean, Professor A.H. Enor, who explains the layout of the buildings at present under construction. Since 1952, much progress has been made in the construction of permanent buildings. The future machine shop and storerooms of the John Curtin School are largely completed. Near the permanent site is a group of temporary laboratory buildings erected in 1952, which accommodates 4 of the 5 departments of the School of Medical Research. A 5th department, Medical Chemistry, at present at the Wellcome Research Institution in London, will transfer to Canberra when the permanent buildings are completed. In the meantime, a staff of over 120 carry on their research in the temporary accommodation. Professor Enor's own laboratory has a graduate staff of 8. Here, Professor Enor, Mr. Harry Rosenberg, and Miss Dorothy Roberts demonstrate a process in the measurement of the activity of an enzyme. Radioactive isotopes are important tools in biochemical research. And here Dr. Blakely uses a Geiger counter to measure the amount of radioactivity present in a sample. As important as the Geiger counter is the balance which is being used by Dr. Morrison. Dr. G.B. Macinnes uses a Haldane apparatus to test gas samples from a mixer which he and Mr. Argyll are building. Its first use will be for research into the influence of oxygen tension on the growth of intracellular tubercle bacilli. In the Department of Microbiology, Professor Fenner, with a graduate staff of 8, is engaged in studying microorganisms causing disease in man and animals. Professor Fenner and Miss Lois Abbott are investigating the transfer of myxoma virus from mosquito to rabbit. Another aspect of myxomatosis research is the culture of virus on the egg membrane. Joan Richardson and Noel Lavater drill apertures in the shells of partially incubated eggs. Dr. Mikitovitz inoculates an egg membrane. Mr. Ian Marshall examines the development of the myxoma virus. Another team is at work on influenza. At the operating table, Dr. Fazakosh has surgically removed some mouse lungs, and these are now being set up in special test tubes. Miss Graham and Miss Richardson make these little lungs go through respiratory movements and make them inhale influenza virus. As influenza affects experimental mice in much the same way as it does humans, this model provides an elegant method to study the earliest stages of infection. In the Department of Physiology, Professor J.C. Eccles, with a graduate staff of 6, is at present making detailed investigation of living nerve cells in the central nervous system. Miss Rosamond Eccles is using a cathode ray oscillograph in her investigations into the responses of the sympathetic ganglia. This equipment and this micromanipulator are two of the special pieces built in the school's own workshops. The temporary workshops have already produced some fine equipment, which will eventually be installed in the permanent laboratories. Rudolf Pilling came from Germany to blow glass for the John Curtin School of Medical Research. The chief glassblower, Mr. William Tice, became a master of his craft in Holland. Mr. John Rowe, the instrument maker, is building a Warburg bath. Library resources available are adequate for complete service to the medical school. Before returning to Oxford, Sir Howard and members of the staff of the school make a survey of progress on the new buildings. Only 9 years earlier, the Australian National University was little more than a suggestion that was not without its critics and skeptics. Six years ago, the proposals of the Interim Council were accepted. Now, in 1954, the pioneers of the idea of setting up an Australian Institute for Medical Research are confident that if nothing unforeseen occurs to delay their accepted plans, their scheme will reach full fruition within a few years. The John Curtin School of Medical Research within the Australian National University in Canberra will become, in the words of Sir Howard Florey, a focus of international interest.